Trading Time with your host, John Rousseau.
Tyler Harlton is a visionary entrepreneur with one thing on his mind: doing things the most difficult way possible by hand. Him and I have that motto and that practice in our businesses, and we've watched our businesses grow over the years. The level of quality that he delivers in his products is unparalleled in the industry, and I'm really excited to have him on to discuss his latest venture, which is an alcohol-free product. In a time where we need to focus more on our families and our communities and the health of both of those, I don't think his product could be any better timed. Enjoy my conversation with Tyler Harlton. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for suggesting this and even putting out ideas that are worth talking about a little bit.
Yeah. We've known each other for some time now. The very first memory that I have of you, you were wearing a ball cap and you had a ponytail. You looked filthy. You were disgustingly filthy. You were working very hard with your hands. And I was very impressed with your attitude. You just seemed like a really straightforward guy. Nothing really in the way of like just being friends. We were neighbors for years in an industrial complex down in Summerland where we both ran our businesses independent of each other but next door to each other. We've collaborated over the years on various projects, from dinner parties to special nights and events and sales pitches. We've watched our families grow up in the same community. We've watched our businesses grow and develop, and I want to kind of get an origin story from you today. Maybe some of the defining moments of your life and career that you might want to talk about. And I guess I'm interested in your competitive advantage in the marketplace, the niche that you've carved out for yourself with your new product that you've launched, which is such an impressive product. And I want to discuss your edge. I want to discuss what gives you your edge, what motivates you, and let's start with that.
Yeah, that seems quite heavy, but I know, I know that we're going to get into it. So I guess the roots of the winery in an industrial area. So, you know, back then we were guys who were looking for a space and a space to create, and I think about that as a starting point, and that wasn't creating like a product to try it out in the market. It was more, this needs to be created. I'm going to do this. This needs to be done. It doesn't exist, but this is my path to this creative endeavor. And you could say that would be selfish or whatever it is, but the bottom line is that for me was a starting point. I want to create. I mean, and you were doing the same thing. It's the same idea. I'm going to find this space. I'm not even going to put up a sign. I'm just going to create. And so I think from that starting point, if at the inception your idea is to create something, then that puts you on a whole different track. I think that when we look around after years, we have certain observations that we try out, and probably those observations prove to be a little more true. With the winery with TH Wines, that was a successful business, creative hands-on business that was successful because probably a lot of it was, you know, being a good operator, showing up and putting in a lot of hours. And the transition from that to being Canada's first non-alcoholic winery was probably taking some of the wisdom with the winery and just realizing that if you're a good operator, you have opportunities and they're probably greater than you think. Mm-hmm. And also for my family, this idea that the world around us is, we don't agree with all of the things around us. when Taylor and I talk a lot of the time, it's I guess it's judging a little bit. It's saying, are there a lot of kind of like hamster on treadmill behaviors around us? Which just means that when we look at the people around us, are a lot of people doing things that we're really not in line with? And we found the answer was yes. And also for this product, this new non-alcoholic product, it really is something that matches us, but it probably realizes in the world around us in the same way there are a lot of hamster on treadmills. There's also, people are buying into a lot of narratives and they maybe haven't investigated the narratives.
Yeah.
I know in my world that the narrative given to you by the alcohol industry is a narrative. The narrative given to you by the sugar industry is a narrative. And what's really relevant to me now is that if this is the world we live in, our children are being preached to in the same way. And I think people underestimate how much garbage is being thrown at us to create certain behaviors. And maybe our edge or what we're doing is saying, we're just not going to engage with so much around us that's negative. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I'm happy to be making this new product. It's Canada's only non-alcoholic wine, but the strange thing is that in the entire market, it is the only sugar-free non-alcoholic wine. Now, for most people, that's not a big deal.
Two of the things we are most addicted to in our culture, sugar and alcohol, and this is a product that has neither.
Yeah, and the whole thing about not a single non-alcoholic winery was doing sugar-free. It just blew my mind that it didn't exist. And I understand we all love sugar, but people dumping sugar into products, not a great thing. Dumping, alcohol into products, not a great thing. Like there was so much about it that we didn't agree with, but it probably is, if you look at that, you could say, well, this kind of applies to a lot of the world around us. Like, why do I want to spend more time, outside than inside? Why do I want to spend more time in a building space that makes me good? It's like, well, that's because that's what I value. And so this larger project of being, how do we get to live our values? And then also, I'm not enthralled by the information coming to me even from the most educated, well-moneyed people either. So I think to me it really is this challenge. It's saying, what is the good information and how do I accommodate that and build it into my business? Mm-hmm. That's kind of a starting point about what I've been thinking about.
So we have this saying in our family, let's try not to be just humans doing, let's be human beings. Mm-hmm. We've, to the hamster and the treadmill thing. Yeah. That's a human doing.
Yeah.
You're saying that when we distract ourselves with certain chemicals, compounds, narratives, we get into like an autopilot scenario whereby we consume this product because we consumed this product last week and the week before that and the week before that and the week before that, and we're just in a pattern now. Yeah. We've created a habit for ourselves, and our organism is comfortable inside this little bubble that we're in right now.
Yeah.
We're a human doing.
Yeah.
When we're not asking the harder, tougher questions that typically revolve around honesty and the need for honesty. Yeah. Is this good for me? Is this good for my community? Is this sending the right message to my children?
Yeah.
This level of consumption
of
anything, whatever it is. Yeah. And the level of consumption that you're confronting is the alcohol and sugar consumption thing, which I think is such an interesting topic. Mm-hmm. I can remember distinctly the day that I came to you 5 years ago and said, I'm done drinking. Mm-hmm. And I'm not ever going to drink again. And I can remember you looking at me, and I was shocked to hear this from you, but you said, John, I'm thinking about the same thing. In fact, you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about starting up a non-alcoholic winery. And I was like, what?
Yeah, you know what? I forgot that conversation. Yeah.
I was like, that is a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And
That was a
I was
long
I
time
was
ago.
excited about that because, I mean, I love wine. Let's be honest, it's a beautiful contribution
Yeah.
to a meal, as a part of a gift or whatever. It's a nice thing to do with fruit. It's a nice expression artistically.
Yeah.
But I don't like what ethanol does to my organism.
Yeah.
I can't have it on board and be interfacing with the people that I need to interface with on a daily basis from a business perspective, my family. I just can't have ethanol on board. I don't function properly. It's not the fuel my body craves.
Yeah.
So to have something that replaces the spirit of wine
Yeah.
without the downside of it is beautiful.
Yeah, what you're saying about ethanol on board, that's really what it comes down to. You can pretend your way around that, but if at a certain point when you go through the pros and cons list and there's not a lot on the pros side, then it's kind of easy to land there. Although thinking back at that time, I probably knew it was going to happen, but I didn't really know what that meant. But again, I like challenges. Like, to me, it's like that's what we're kind of wired for. Like, we like to explore and we like to create. And what was really nice about this one, it just so happens that I have a lot of the pieces in the toolbox that make me better at doing this than most people. And so it's nice when that lines up. I think of you bringing back those days, and that was just a lot of hours of work, and a lot of that work needed to be done. But I'm in a bit of a different situation now with family and this different degree of accountability, and especially on like that ethanol on board thing. Once you start to really think through what does your family need, what does your business need, well, that hit of ethanol doesn't really, it's romantic, but it doesn't have a place anymore. And for me, I can't, it's hard to believe it, I don't really even remember life drinking, or I don't even think about going back to doing that. So comfortable am I in what's going on right now. Yeah, and it's probably not going to change. I think when I do think about the alcohol, ethanol thing and the sugar thing, to me it does tie into this large thing. It's about diet, and I think there's the physical things we put into our body. Food is medicine. That's a great reason why we would pay attention to things like sugar, alcohol. 100 years from now, they'll know whatever else we're putting into our body that we shouldn't be. We think about physical activity, which is what you're talking about. Like, I'm encouraged to go outside and do things. We're thinking about sleep. And when I think about these things, I think, yes, there's the things we put in our body, but I really think more about now, it's more and more just into the information. It's what are we consuming, and what are our kids consuming? And knowing full well that if you give someone enough money, they will brainwash someone into a behavior. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people would say they would not quite understand that if you don't work in the marketing world, that really marketing is that powerful. If someone has a certain amount of money, they can turn someone into a raving lunatic, or they can turn someone into hyper-depressed, suicidal. Information is this powerful. And in the same way that I'm worried about what's coming into my body, the food, I really think what's going on with information it's even more relevant. I mean, I'm not going to say it's even more scary, but getting back to what I'd mentioned about our kids, mm-hmm. They're being bombarded with information, and we consider ourselves amongst the more well-informed people of our society. I still think we're kind of underestimating that a little bit too.
So if I can potentially support what you're proposing, I remember a time when I initially joined Instagram, it was my friends and I sharing photos with each other.
Probably was actually that at some point, wasn't it?
That was the impetus of the app.
Yeah.
Share just photos with
Yeah.
your friends.
Yeah.
Now it's just an advertisement platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're hooked into just this like massive algorithm that yeah, maybe shows us some things that we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, there's a lot that we take in every day that we didn't ask for.
Yeah. I think, but part of that too is you and I operate in this world, and as people who must sell our ideas to put food on the table, it's like, well, on one hand, we need to be present in society to a certain degree, and we want to choose our own terms as much as possible, but yeah, how do we approach these frictions? And for me, I'm selling a product that is consumed by a certain demographic, and the reality is I must understand that demographic to a certain degree. So it's like, we want to be detached in some ways, but then on the other hand, we have to realize that we're ultimately like part of society. Like the society that I complain about, I know is also the society
that feeds you.
Feeds you. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're talking about demographics. Have you been able to analyze your client? We always have this thing in business is, know your client. Who's your client? My clients are 98% women.
Yeah.
Who are your clients? What do they do? What are they interested in?
There would be some of that overlap. We're not entirely sure, but it'd be women, and we sell an expensive or a product that lands in almost in the luxury category.
Yes.
It's as expensive as a fancy coffee at Starbucks kind of thing. So that's somewhat limiting, and we just try not to go too deep into that right now. Right now we're in the market, and product has some degree of popularity, and our idea is that let's keep putting it out there, and let's almost think less about who that person is and trying to just try not to have blinders on. Even in starting in this business, we're always trying to, I work with Chris Palliachini, he's my business partner in this. We're always trying to step backward and just say, what really is going on? What's happening? Like, I feel like we have this set of assumptions, and it's like everything in life, like we run around with assumptions, and sometimes life will kick you in the ass and make you check your assumptions. Like someone has like health concerns, suddenly that person questions things. They look around at the assumptions in their world and they say, oh, I had this wrong. And so even in our business, we're at the point where we're trying to spend the most time possible almost questioning assumptions, being like, this is working, and like, why do we assume that things have to work this way? Which is kind of what we do in our personal lives. It's like, why do we assume that these behaviors have to happen?
Right.
Well, they don't have to happen. In fact, like once we sort of chip away a little bit, we look at it and it's like, well, we are programmed. I mean, it's normal for a human being to have fear, and someone with fear and anxiety will make a certain behavior. And sometimes when I look at the fear and anxieties that have been built into me, when I think about them, I think, well, no, that's just no longer relevant. Like I am being told that I must gather money in a certain way. I must put on an outfit and have a piece of paper and walk into a corporate building and work with numbers until these numbers line up, and then I clap my hands, and maybe that means I get more money. I mean, that's what a lot of people do. And then they gather the money, and then somehow in some way, this is society, and this is society evolving, but we think to ourselves, is that really adding anything to our culture or society? Well, the answer, some of it. Like, I'm sure my banker doing something at some point is relevant and better than working with someone in my community. But these things around me, they're not that, a lot of the things I see around me are not that inspiring. And that's why even being here in this conversation, in this setting, it's inspiring because it's giving a space for ideas that are not as welcome elsewhere.
Yeah. I've always had this struggle. I can remember a good friend of mine, a lawyer here in town, said to me, he was a mentor of mine growing up and poured a lot into my life and was very adamant about the fact that he looked right at me and said, never get into the legal profession. Never do what I do. It's life sucking. It's soul destroying. You meet people you don't want to spend any time with and you spend too much time with them.
Yeah.
And you're just doing it for money.
Yeah.
And so we do something that's completely unrelated to our existence as a human being for credits, as you laid out.
Yeah.
So that we can potentially extract ourselves out of that situation in the form of a vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
Or what? Retirement vacation or something?
Something. My wife has this thing that she says, I want to design a life with you, my husband, that we don't need a vacation from. That's our goal as a family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I hate to say, you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, but it's sort of more or less a thread of that where if you are living intentionally and you're honest with yourself and you're conscious about what you're consuming and you're not getting sucked down to unhealthy habits, where's the possibility for any carcinogen to infiltrate that scenario?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. This idea of getting back to what I'm saying, it's like this gathering and protecting of a sum of money to be deployed for an RV in 30 years or something. Like, I know that's what we all do, and I mean it's around us. But why? Why wouldn't we just work as hard as we could to build the space, engineer, construct the space you want to be in, and then you're not kind of showing up for 35 years for a pension. You're living it.
You're showing up for 70 years for your life.
Yeah. I mean, my dad he's in his 70s, like he still farms. That's just what he does. And it means that sometimes he can't get away, but I look at that and that to me is normal. And I think like even the farming town I grew up in, you would have farmers, but to pay the bills, well, I have a job welding.
Right.
I'm an electrician. I'm a crane operator. And then they also farm, and that's just what people did. They weren't aspiring to get a great job and to scale pay grades. It was like, no, I farm. And I can't even pay for that, so I'm a welder. And what a great community that was. So we have our farm, something breaks down, my dad can do a crappy weld, but if he needs a good weld, he would go see Dewey or go see Bruce. And so you had this community and nowadays you would just call it what it was, a community of creators, of people raising kids. And that was where I grew up was, no one talked about if you live in a small town, your income is never going to be over 61 grand a year. But it's something I thought about in law school. I was like looking around this classroom and I was like, not a single person here would ever accept a life of living in a small town if they couldn't make more than a certain amount of money. And I have a lot of great friends from that law school career, but that's the truth.
Yes.
I mean, that's the truth about those people. And there's a certain truth that I grew up with that when I look back on it and we have conversations about people who understand how to get things done, I mean, you'd still try. Like, if I was in that community, I would try to build something. And then if I actually needed someone smart on building, I'd call you and say, hey, what's going on here? It's the same thing in the winemaking community.
Of course.
Certain people have answers that are really easy to give. And on one hand, you could be billing yourself out as a consultant or a lawyer for $350 an hour. But on the other hand, how communities work, it's generally information is shared to help each other and to build a community, versus I moved to Vancouver to get a $110,000 job, and then once I got there, I started to get brainwashed into thinking I needed to own this, and then I started gathering money, and then I started watching interest rates, and then I went in this direction. Like, that's not a great world. That's what most people aspire to, but
The world of speculation.
speculation how? Speculation
If I
is
put
like
this,
imagining
if I put
that-
this much money over here
yeah,
and speculate in this market, whether it be soybeans or real estate, I will be able
yeah,
to do
Vancouver, there's your
less.
example.
and I'll have more. I'll be able to work less and have more.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're proposing is we're just going to work and have what we have and enjoy it.
Yeah.
We're just going to work all the time.
Yeah.
Every time I see you, you're working.
Yeah. It turns out that way. And even working today with Ella in the back seat, it was kind of a fun day. It was being in Kelowna. It was dealing with people who are selling me things. It was selling things to people. It was social visits. It was putting out fires. But that to me was fun. And I was thinking,
It's your life.
yeah, that's my life. And I think growing up with my dad, if I got to go ride around in the truck for the day, nothing better. I mean, those days, just a pickup truck, there's a flat bench there. You just stood there in the middle, had fun.
Heater
fun.
blowing at you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, mosquitoes, grasshoppers coming in, giant grasshoppers like hitting you in the head. But it's nice. When you see a neighbor, you had time for a visit. You weren't time. I think one of the nice things about Saskatchewan, this is changing and it'll change forever, but in Saskatchewan, where I'm from, or in that rural, it's probably just more like in that rural setting, people have time to be nice. It's not that people in Vancouver aren't nice. It's just they don't have time, because time is money. In most places, time is money. And I think to where I grew up, it was more people just had time. They had time to be nice. They had time to pull over and help someone. They had time to pull over in a gravel road like farmers chatting. And I mean, that's probably almost conditioned out of me, but I can remember that. Like, two vehicles pull up, boop, they stop. And if someone's behind, they don't honk the horn. They would maybe drive around, or they would just sit and wait, because who cares? Who cares? Like that kind of thing. Like, I'm going to do this behavior. I don't care. What are you going to do? Kind of thing. Because we're all in a community. We're not like, you're denying me access on the road to Penticton and I must be there.
Because I have a commercial appointment.
Yeah.
That I need to transact. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And you know, what's interesting, and you know, we often hear that a healthy community to live in is one where the annual wage times 3 is the cost of a house.
I never thought about that metric before.
So if you make $50,000 a year,
Yeah.
a house is $150,000 to $200,000.
Yeah.
That's a community.
Yeah.
That's a healthy
Yeah.
ratio.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
And that we're just talking economically at that point. But what you've pointed out is when you get into a situation whereby you have a 10 or 20 to 1 ratio,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are the other things that you lose from a community experience perspective? And you just
Right.
pointed them out.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have time
Yeah.
to wait for anybody to do anything, because the margin for error in your life and spreadsheet is so small.
Yeah.
You have to be executing all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
we've discounted that ability to just be a human being instead of a human doing.
Yeah.
And what you're describing in your hometown is a bunch of human beings hanging out doing human being things.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is not the place for everyone. And when I say that's disappearing, it is going to disappear. That ideas come, and you can't really buffer yourself against them. I mean, I'm in the example of living in an expensive house, and so I do feel that the margins are small as well. So like, in some senses, I've bought into this as well. But it's funny when you think about that metric. It's like, yeah, that probably existed for so long in so many places.
Well, just
So yeah,
1980.
yeah, I know.
I'm not sure if you've ever had your hair cut from Bill down at the barber shop here in
No.
Summerland. That's somebody that we should be interviewing as well. Somebody that works with his hands like you.
Yeah,
You know, back in the 80s when everything crashed in 82,
yeah,
the bank was calling him. Can you please buy this house off of us? Well, how much is it? Because I already own a couple properties in Kimberley. Well, it's $4,000. Like a house.
yeah,
Like a house
yeah.
that somebody would live in today in Summerland. Built in the late 70s.
Yeah,
$4,000.
yeah,
He's like, well, I was making I was making some pretty good money back then, right? Like, well, there was a time where it was negative.
yeah,
The relationship between
yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
it wasn't a
3
3 to 1, it was a negative.
Yeah, a person could work hard for 2 summers, save up money, and buy something. Yeah,
Multiple things.
multiple things. Yeah,
And so, yeah, no, I mean, okay, so this is really interesting because this has kind of come around to the point where I specialize in now. And being in the trades specifically and talking about working with our hands.
yeah,
You know, we have this situation where we are facing a housing crisis. But the crisis that's before that is the skilled labor crisis that we're facing.
yeah,
Just enough people that know how to do the skills that are in demand to satiate the needs of the people that live in the communities. So that housing isn't this massive investment that takes in 40 years to pay off.
yeah, yeah.
So that you can do other things and see other parts of the world and enjoy your family a bit more, where the
Yeah.
margins of error aren't
Yeah,
so small
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
you can potentially maybe spend some more time with your kids, potentially.
Yeah,
But we're not going to get to that, I don't think, without more people willing to get out of the speculation game and get into the value adding game that you're in, where
Yeah.
you take something that nature grows, you pick
Yeah.
it with your hand, you run it through a press,
yeah,
you add a whole bunch of value to this thing in the whole process,
yeah,
and here's the product that you get to enjoy at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever you're doing or whatever I'm doing.
yeah,
We're taking raw materials,
yeah,
we're shaping them to our will,
Yeah.
adding value, and satiating a need in the marketplace.
yeah. A bit of a tangent on that. When I drive down it's just something I've thought a bit. When you're driving down the road and this is a first world country and you see houses, I just wonder to myself, and you see infrastructure, it's like, at what point do people just let infrastructure deteriorate because they can't afford it? Like right now, you can probably find someone to do the work. You can probably pay that person, and it probably keeps things to a certain level. But at what point do the things we're making they're not meant to stick around forever? I'm just wondering, absent labor, this stuff it starts to crumble. Like people stop to paint. I know that's not going to happen, but sometimes I just imagine that world too, and I feel like, I know enough people that do this work, and it shouldn't happen. But what you're talking about, like you're saying, some of this is that people there's just not enough skilled creators. Like that's kind of what's going
Yes.
on, right? Like it would just be, you would look around and there would be just not a lot of skilled creators around you. And just because these people aren't engaged in that's the idea, right? Or they're not
Yes.
motivated, or...
Culturally, we've been telling people for the last 30 years to get into information technology,
Yeah,
sciences, computer sciences.
yeah,
We have shunned working with your hands.
yeah.
I wonder when that became unfashionable. Was it when we started offshoring all of our high-paid manufacturing jobs to Asia? Maybe.
Yeah,
That's not work that we need to do anymore. We're going to ship that out to the poor people in Asia to do for us, and then we'll buy it back with the jobs that we don't have and the money we didn't earn.
right, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when the question is when did working with your hands become unfashionable?
Yeah,
As a result of that, what were the jobs that became fashionable? And now that we have so many people qualified in those now fashionable jobs, what
Yeah.
are the jobs that are becoming fashionable now? Because we know fashion's a trend.
Right. Yeah.
And when I run into a pipe fitter that I'm working with on site, pipe fitter, young family, 2 kids, beautiful wife, owns a house here in Summerland, and I roll up to him today. It's a $100,000 brand new diesel truck, and the whole side's bashed in. Somebody crashed into him. I'm like, what the hell happened to your truck? He's like, oh, this happened in like months and months and months ago. I'm like, you're not gonna get it fixed. It's a brand new truck. I can't get it fixed. Well, what do you mean you can't get it fixed? Well, there's no auto body shops taking any new clients right now. Well, why is that? Well, because the average age of an auto body worker in the province is 60 years old. Does that mean that every trade is suffering? Yes.
Yeah.
And that means that because all the baby boomers, oh shit. So just basic like basic, get your car fixed service. Come on, replace a body panel that you order from a prefabricated factory. I just need body panel ABC. Can you send me one of those, please?
Yeah. That's the type of job that's not happening.
Well, that's the
That's the type of job that's suddenly difficult, and really that's not a difficult job when we actually break it down in that way.
We're not asking the person at the body shop to invent the body panel.
Exactly, yeah.
It's
crazy.
pressed. So when you look at it, you're going like, yes, for a time, being a doctor or a lawyer, come on, baby, bill them.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at it, you're going like, to be a 40-year-old pipe fitter, master pipe fitter,
Yeah.
or like a 40-year-old like master mechanic in this marketplace,
Yeah.
with all these people retiring.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think probably even in the 80s, if you were a welder, a sober welder that worked 40 hours a week in the 80s, you probably were paid not a lot of money. But nowadays, you'd have to imagine all of these things. If you've got experience, like kind of the sky's the limit. And especially if not a lot of new entrants and the people in their 60s and 70s, like farmers like my dad, he's going to die eventually.
Yeah.
You know, 70s, mid-70s farming. Yeah. How does the world change? I mean, I think part of it is you do want to have some understanding of just how general stuff works. People really don't. People really do not, I don't think.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Is this where you get into the destruction of civilization? Like what? But I mean, like what? What holds things? Yeah, but it's probably a fair question. It's like what holds things up? Like societies fall apart, empires fall apart. These things happen. We never know. The people who are in it don't know what's going on. I mean, it's 10 years from now we could look back on this conversation and be like, you guys didn't know this was going to happen, but at least you could imagine it. At least you weren't sitting there being like, all these Canadian dollars that we're gathering are going to have this, it's going to offer me this giant chunk of security because that was the case for the past X years. Like, that's not true. And then, so if we know that, that's the kind of lives we're trying to live.
Yeah.
If we're looking into that future, like, what are the things we want in that future? Well, community is a big one. Even but just back to the basic, like things we talk about, like harvesting sunlight to make food. It's a real concern.
Yeah.
It's a real thing that should be on, that should be talked about.
Well, and from a technological perspective, when measured against the capabilities of our ancestors, it's a pretty basic thing to do.
Yeah, it should be one of the. It should be amongst one of the most basic things. I mean, I even think, like what we're doing in Saskatchewan, like dryland farming, this idea that with no irrigation, you're producing all of this protein, all of this food, like to me, that's a miracle. Well, no one's going to say that's a miracle, but when thinking back, like I live in a valley here where everything must be irrigated for the most part, you sometimes think these things that we don't have a lot of respect for probably should. We don't.
For farmers?
Like things about who is producing this thing and why, and do we value it? Okay, well, does your society value it? does your government value it? Who is like, what's really happening here? I mean, I have to have in my business conversations with bankers that are just they border on silly, but it's a silly world. Someone holds on to my money and they give me a 0.5% return. And if I put on a hat and say, I'm a business person, they'll say, I'll lend this money to you at 11. And you'll say, this is kind of weird, but you're telling me you take all of my money and give me this pittance, and you're backed by the government, so the government loves this behavior, and you're turning around and lending it to me for 12%, like, that should be criminal. It's like, no, this is the way we've set up our society. It must work this way. And it's bizarre. It's just one of those things where you kind of shake your head, but that's where we're at. Our society has made this choice. Our government has made this choice to say, in the best of worlds, this is how these things should function. But then for someone who actually lives in it, you say to yourself, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
So you're
but
saying,
I guess it could be worse.
You're saying that if you are production, you are being jockeyed by a speculative bureaucrat. Because, I mean, really, you think about it, it's your money.
Yeah.
You got $100,000 in the bank and you need a loan for $1 million.
Yeah.
They're going to lend you your money at 12%.
Yeah.
And pay you, as you say, 0.5% on your money being in their institution.
I'm sure the spread is that bad.
Well, of course it is.
I'm sure it's not 0.5% or 2% or something that would seem reasonable. It probably is something so outrageous that you just kind of shake your head. Well, that's why people have these behaviors, because how can you compete in that environment? Or what message does that send to you?
Well, the message that sends to somebody is that it pays more to be a speculator and a jockey than the horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
The critter doing all the work to get you across the finish line.
Yeah, the person doing the work and the person creating, Yeah, that's a little bit sour, but I mean, even you think about sometimes you want to pay a lawyer to resolve a situation. Yeah. Sometimes that's a good thing, or sometimes you want to pay a doctor to resolve a situation. But in that world where too much goes in that direction, at some point you kind of push back as well. It's like, I don't think I need the banker doing this behavior. In fact, this is the wrong way to approach things. But
and that's simply because we are accustomed to looking at every transaction from a what kind of value can I add perspective. Mm-hmm. And then when we see such ridiculous behavior being rewarded in such a way, because they don't expedite tasks either.
Yeah.
You pay them this premium.
Yeah.
The task isn't expedited.
Yeah.
It's months of phone calls and emails and follow-ups and appraisals and prospectus and then what? Well, we got all these documents that absolved us of liability from this investment and made it so that when and if this business venture does crash, we can go to the government and get bailed out for everything.
Yeah.
And you have to pay us 10% on top of that.
Yeah.
And we didn't add any value. You did all the footwork. You got us all the documents that we needed to absolve ourselves of liability.
Yeah.
And here's your bill.
Yeah. And that's just the way it is. And so I think, like, in the face of this, then you should just get a job for the bank, so you have no responsibility. But do you really? But it gets back to, like, is that really what you want to do? Could you really have that life where you have to look into someone's face and nod your head and say, that's exactly what you're doing. In order to pay for all of this, we are going to strip you of something that probably belongs to you, and we're going to do it with a straight face. I mean, that's a lot of people have to do this. Their giant business has to do behavior, and you have to look in someone's eye and say, our business wasn't responsible for that. And everyone looking around knows that what you were doing was a bad behavior, but we had to do it. The banker had to do it. You know, it's this chain of just not, you know, people just having less accountability, less responsibility.
Yeah.
And I get it. People want that. No, a lot of people don't want to have to get up and create something. And in fact, not everyone should have to do that. Like in a healthy society, you can be all the way across the spectrum. If your creation is something that is deemed to be less valuable, it doesn't matter. You still get to do it. As opposed to the situation where people are just sort of, again, like, you just think of all the metaphors, like zombies, like
Stunned.
hamster treadmill, stunned.
People are kind of stunned.
Yeah, stunned, like just, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and I think the idea is that the more time you spend around those people, the more time in my head I'm building spreadsheets that are going to please the banker. I know that's not healthy. It's not healthy for anyone. They want me to be doing that. They want me to be looking at my business that way, but I know it's not the way to look at things. We shouldn't be calculating all the time. We shouldn't be looking at margins and using language and using economics language that doesn't make sense. But we're drawn into it.
Okay, so hold on. I want to just dissect that a bit. You're suggesting that in business decision capacity, the number one driver should be our intuition versus the mechanics of a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I know it shouldn't be the mechanics of, I know with certainty it shouldn't be the mechanics of a spreadsheet, but the hard part is that someone's going to say, you must give me a metric. It must be something. And money and dollars happens to be measurable. Now, if I talk about something, exactly, if I talk about something like, well, the community needs this, it's like, that's great, but can I sell that to my board? I got to go talk to my shareholders tomorrow. You know what my shareholders want? They want numbers. I need to prove that my sales, my revenue is as high. That's the language we're getting into, whereas coming from a community, it would never be that sort of language. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense.
Of course.
But if humans need to have these metrics that make sense, and so maybe it is kind of it probably is intuition. Intuition is these behaviors that they feel right, and we know they're right because they are part of our culture, and
or should be
that or should be, yes,
be part
exactly.
of our culture.
They were part, yeah, like they exist and they should continue to exist, even if we don't see them. And if you don't do that, then you're making your life much more difficult. But then again, it's not about easy life anyways. So like, what is easy life? I go to the office for 7 hours and no one gets mad at me? Like, is that where you're trying to get to? Like, no, like there should be work. There should be actual work, right? Like that's
physical work.
There could be physical work. I mean,
strenuous mental work.
Yeah, I think for me, I look at the cadence of a farmer. It's like, well, in January, I sit there kind of stressed. I wait for it to get warmer than -20 so I can ship grain. Awesome. That's what you do in January? Yeah.
Right.
And then I have lots of naps. That's crazy. Well, actually, it's kind of human. February, what do you do?
Hibernate.
Well, I do this. Yeah. And in March. And then during this period, you work like all day, every day for 40 to 60 days? Yeah. And then what do? You must do this? Well, no, then like so-and-so gets off. I'm kind of working on getting this building done, or I'm doing this, or, you know, my kid likes to do this thing, or I'm like, innumerable things. Maybe I'm building bins, and then it's harvest time, and then it's post-harvest, and then maybe you're going hunting. To me, that is the normal world, not the world of someone who works, you know, X hours a week for X hours of holidays and, you know, pensions, things like that.
Pensions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfunded liabilities that are about to explode in the face of.
Yeah, what's going on with that? I wonder. Honestly.
Yeah, well, I can remember Karen's grandfather saying to us when before he died, he said, "Okay, kids, we love you so much. Keep paying your CPP so we can keep collecting it." That was like one of the last things I remember him ever saying to us.
Yeah,
Before he drove out the driveway.
Yeah.
We're living you guys are gonna be.
Yeah.
You won't ever get to enjoy this illusion that we were sold by speculators.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like you and I will never. Well, there's not. Why would we even think that there would be such a thing as pension? What, you don't have a pension? Get the what?
Yeah.
You're of the demographic that believes there is such a thing as a pension?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah. It doesn't. If that's the idea, if that's what you're holding out for. I mean, I think that's never been the case. What people be holding out for in the past would be like, I get to see my grandkids run around and smile. That's it, kind of. Humans, that's all they want, and a lot of humans, that just makes them satisfied. It's not this or that. It's like, I get to still exist in a community with things that I helped to build. That's it. And like, how about the money? Oh, okay, like, I think about money a little bit, but really, that shouldn't be the main, that shouldn't be the main thing. It is the things you built around you, the buildings, the relationships.
So you're suggesting, as we've touched on in previous conversations today, that it is the responsibility of the elders in the community to raise the children while our demographic makes all the money. Because we really do, right? I mean, the amount of money that you are able to generate with your visionary entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
Well, your kids can't make that much money.
Yeah.
And this their body doesn't work properly.
Yeah.
So they're match made in heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
And get to work.
Yeah. I think that's...
And then and if that's the message that you're sending, and that's the signal that's getting put into the environment...
Yeah.
Well, what's the matter with that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially the best pension program there is, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I mean, I think my dad's an exception who's farming at that age where things are a lot easier for him, but really... his wisdom, he doesn't, he's not much of an operator, but he adds a little bit of wisdom, but it is up to the younger guys to do the hustling and all the other dealings. But that's probably how society, kids have fun, adults work, and then we have this other generation that doesn't sit there and just spend money. They're really just enjoying the fruits of a life of hard work. Which doesn't, that's not really it's not really what's going on with the bargain right now in our society, though. I guess it's just gather enough money to protect yourself against whatever comes later in life. And it's like, how much money is that? Is it a 50,000? Is it 500,000? Is it 2 million?
Well, that depends on what interest rates are.
Totally.
Well, are interest rates going to stay low forever? Yes. Oh, well, I'm good then.
Yeah.
Right.
What a way to live.
I like the model that you have going on in your program. I've always liked your model. I always liked looking across the fence into your area of the industrial land that we rented, and I have this like distinct image of you like sorting grapes by hand, and your hashtag for a while was by hand.
Yeah.
And, there's sort of a play on words that could be had there, too, I think, that I've never really analyzed until just this very moment. But by hand, yeah, we made it by hand, but also by hand. Mm-hmm. Buy things that are handmade.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's my...
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's what we do, right?
That's a pretty simple mantra.
That's what you do.
Have a look around.
Buy something that's... Buy a bespoke product that's made by hand.
Yeah.
And that money stays in your community. This is the thing that we tell our clients. I thank every single one of my clients in this exact way. I look them straight in the eye after I've either hugged them, told them I love them, and shook their hands or whatever I say. Mm-hmm. Thank you for doing business with us. Mm-hmm. Every dollar that you spend is a dollar that you have the opportunity to earn back. Mm-hmm. Because we try to patron local businesses only. Yeah. We buy in our business the most expensive, high quality tools from local suppliers that we can. Yeah. The most expensive, high quality materials from Canadian suppliers that we can. We
Yeah.
want our money to stay in our communities.
Yeah.
That's a product that you offer as well.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not some multinational conglomerate, alcohol
Mm-hmm.
conglomerate.
Yeah.
You have a product that is made by you or someone you know or very close to
Yeah.
in a local facility. And when
Yeah.
we buy it from you, we know that we have the opportunity to earn those dollars back.
Yeah.
That's the type of community that we want to live in.
Yeah. That's as far as rules of thumb, that's a great one. People doing handmade things or hands involved with them, a human being behind them, great. Just try that. That's as easy if someone were to move to a small town, or if someone were to say, well, is it difficult what you do? You'd say, not really. Like, it's not. If you can find it on Amazon and you can buy 35 of them for $14, that's probably the opposite. Like,
Right.
that is just the way it is. And sometimes we need these things, but for the most part, it's not adding anything. Like, is it really? Not so much. Maybe there's an Amazon driver here that makes a bit of money.
Right.
That's about it.
What do you miss, Tyler, about the TH wine era?
What do I miss? I can't even say that. I mean, probably it's always nice to create something and to, honestly, I liked falling into periods of time where I know that on my calendar, it's just like for 40 days, you're not going to find me. Why is that? Well, it's harvest. And that to me, one of the things I don't love about a small business is I'm putting on the administrative hat, then I'm putting on the sales hat, and then I'm putting on the production hat, and then I'm putting on the freight hat, and then I'm putting on
And I'm cleaning the bathrooms.
marketing hat, and then facility, and then I'm putting on the facility hat. And I think when we have to wear all those hats, it's just not as nice. But I love during harvest to really just block off the calendar and just say, like, every day I'm driving down south, I'm gonna go visit with the farmers, taste grapes. Maybe the grapes come in, maybe they don't. I mean, that's really nice. I think the rhythm of production is just that's just a really nice thing, and especially in that industry when you're tied to the cadence of agriculture. That's also just a really nice thing too.
Yes. Just from an observation of beauty perspective, that time of year, to see what the natural environment and a bit of intervention from humans can do. It is really beautiful to see those clusters mature.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I and someone would say, well, do you miss that? And I'd say, on the land that I live on right now, it's way more interesting. If I'm in the wine industry, I'm looking at 5 acres of grape variety X. That grape variety is a clone. It means every single plant is genetically identical, which means it all, for management, it makes it very easy, but you look at it and you say, well, that's monoculture. That's like, that system is not a great system. It's profitable, but really, do you want to have that system with no diversity sitting out there when infestation or a problem comes? The answer is no.
Yeah.
That's not great. Now, I get my little acre and a half, and I'm out, it gets wet, so I go to grab some mushrooms. Amazing, I'm eating mushrooms. Oh, they're black currants already, I'm eating those. Turn around, Eldon's eating some Saskatoon berries. I get to walk through this agricultural world where I get the best of it, which is I'm just out there harvesting, and I don't get the worst of it, which is I'm a farmer and I'm worried about, like, in my apple block, cutting out like fire blight right now. People cutting down
and spraying for a whole bunch of different pests with chemicals that I don't like. And
yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's our commercial society. Agriculture is commercial, but I love to get to do this different agriculture. It's not even agriculture. It's really just being on a piece of land, watching what it loves to produce. Like, you've got your Saskatoons out there. Amazing. They're like, for a certain period of time, that's great. And you're probably gonna have a deer walk through your yard that you're gonna shoot at some point. That's food. Like, to me, that's a really nice, it's part of the same tradition of winemaking, but it's not it's not winemaking. It doesn't have some of these other things I'm less interested in, that being, okay, this whole thing about the burden of ethanol and getting away with that. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful now that I get to be operating a business, but the agriculture part of my world, I don't get to block off those 40 days and have this harvest period But I've done that enough too. So I don't really miss that. I think one thing, we did have a great little, like Carsontown, that industrial area, that to me is a lot of fun. And when I think about in my small town in Saskatchewan, there aren't a lot of farmers around. Like the farms have gotten quite big, and so there's less of a community. But when my dad was farming in the 70s and 80s, like just bumping into people who were in the same world as you, which is like dryland farming, survived high interest rates, 80s miserable drought. But once you've gone through that, I mean, these are your, there's nothing like that group of people. And we had something of that in Carsontown, which was just independent owner-operators. And whether someone was restoring a Porsche, or someone was roasting coffee, or someone was beer, or someone was making bespoke furniture. Like that to me was a really nice feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think right now with what we're doing, we have less that community around us, but it's also there's a season, there's just kind of a season for everything, right? Like once I moved to the world of less physical activity to just kind of enjoying it and adding wisdom, hey, that's great too. And I sure as heck love when I was a kid, like Ellen just got to run around and forage stuff off the trees. Like that's pretty amazing too. It's all pretty amazing.
Being a father?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Like you just think to yourself how lucky parents are. Not that I think parents complain, but just the blessing of kids. Like there's nothing like that.
Well, there's no better opportunity to have an intimate relationship with somebody outside of like your wife.
Yeah.
And even then, like we've been talking. Just I know that you have a boy. I've got two daughters. We're just talking about just the dynamics of having daughters.
Yeah. And
how excited I am. I'm saying to myself, I'm like, you know what? I always envision myself being a boy dad. Always.
Yeah.
Having sons and teach them how to hunt and kill something with a spear. But now that I have daughters, I'm like, I would never have the same level of intimacy in a relationship with my daughter-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right, yeah.
But
yeah.
I might be able to have as good or better of a relationship with my son-in-law.
Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because son-in-laws, what do they try to do? Especially if there's a willing party on the other side of the relationship. They want to impress their father-in-law.
Yeah.
So if Isla or Vera brings home like a guy who they will have skills and knowledge and be able to articulate, because those are the people that we're raising.
Yeah.
I potentially have the ability to have such an amazing relationship with these young men.
Yeah, what a blessing, totally.
What a huge blessing. That you think of living in this sort of selfish zone that we lived in for so long, where it was about just pleasing us and having a good time and all of those things. And they were good times.
Yeah.
But I wish I would have started having kids sooner. Now that I know this, I really do. It's my biggest regret.
Yeah, that's funny. And I look back for me, I just think, I'm grateful for this. But as far as going back, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I mean, Chris has two daughters as well, and he started raising, a family like a long time ago. And I would say, I look at my parents, they had 4 kids, 4 healthy kids. I'm like, that just sounds like the most amazing thing, but I never would have known it from watching them with the kids, and even watching my behaviors mimicking my parents from decades ago. All of these things are it's just so interesting. And it's fun. Yeah, it's fun. And I know it's like one of those things where it's going to take you to the extremes of all your emotions, but that's life, right? Like we don't want to be stunned. We don't want to be zombies. We accept that's life. Life is meant to have boundaries further than you think. And getting back to we should be thinking beyond what we're thinking, beyond what we're trained to think, and to have a little passenger that reminds you that, hey, this is the world's biggest adventure. Like, I know that gets knocked out of the kid, and I know that when I'm saying about the information that's being bombarded at children to make them behave a certain way. Before they get that, that's like, what a great lesson that is for an adult to be reminded that like all this construct that society, it doesn't need to be that way. It's like super smart people have made some of this like, but ultimately it's not your canvas, you know, but I know that raising a kid, the kid's he's not gonna think that, you know, he's gonna love the things that I think are shit, but that's also him. That's the way, you know, maybe he comes around.
Yeah. Tyler, I love this new product that you've launched once. I really do. I think that it is answering such a timely question in our growth as a species.
Yeah.
It sounds so ridiculous, doesn't it? Like, could you imagine having this conversation 15 years ago?
No,
like,
not at all.
Oh yeah, we're going to start up a non-alcoholic winery. Like, are you kidding? Like, there just wasn't the awareness around this.
Yeah.
Previously, but now like we know the effects of excess ethanol consumption. We know what that does. We know what our communities look like when people drink too much alcohol.
Yeah.
Am I fair to say that?
Yeah, totally.
And so having an option that still allows adults to socially fit into these scenarios and have some sense of, I don't know, like you say, it's a luxury product.
Yeah.
To still have that feeling as though that we are consuming a bespoke luxury product.
Yeah.
That is such an amazing thing that you're pioneering, man.
And it's not like I think it's just a bit more about inclusivity is probably the word, and we should be able to do and have a lot of things that we want that we just don't. Like it doesn't harm, if I'm drinking non-alcoholic wine, it doesn't harm anyone. Like my request to have this, like it's not costing anyone any resources, and it's like this one article that was talking about some sommeliers in France, and they're, you know, it was kind of like 10% are in this movement of like restaurants should just have a nice non-alcoholic option. Everyone's kind of up in arms. It's like, wine is sacred in France. This is agriculture. You can't say this. And meanwhile, these somms are like, no, it's not an attack on you. It's just like, you can have your industry. When I go to a nice restaurant, I just want a nice non-alcoholic wine option. They exist. They're out there. Why can't we have them? And we're realizing it's like, well, you should have them. What's the answer? And we kind of look around. We're like, well, no one tried. No one really thought that a non-alcoholic wine could be a premium good. No one gave a shit. No one said, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to take the best wine in the valley. I'm going to go to the Okanagan grapes, which are expensive.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something crazy, which is take the finished product and make something that I feel is better. Now that sentence doesn't exist in reality. Someone would say, are you telling me I've got my Okanagan Chateau and you're looking at my product and you have a better end use than what I've done there? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, it's impossible. And maybe it was years ago, but now that we've done it, people are realizing, yeah, like we don't need to buy a tanker of like pus that's floating around the world, take it to my factory in Europe, strip everything out, including alcohol, add sugar, and call this non-alcoholic wine. That's like, that's not non-alcoholic wine.
That's a pop.
That's just like exactly
That's
that.
pop.
Like there is like it's
a drink.
Yeah, it's a beverage,
it's
but
a Franken drink.
yeah, it's a beverage, but you shouldn't even use that terminology. And our idea is like, no, we're actually going to try. What does that mean? We're gonna try to make something that I would actually drink, because I'm sure if you went to these factories and asked the workers there, they're like in Spain or wherever, like, do you drink this? I'm like, well, no, it's got like 45 grams a liter of residual sugar.
Holy
It's
jeez.
got some weird preservatives. Like, why would I drink this? I'd like wine in that case. Wine is actually healthier than this stuff. And that was the world of non-alc wine. And so that's kind of what we had walked into. And then now that we're in it, it turns out that people do like these things. Like there's just a lot of assumptions that happen around us, and it's fun to do. Like selling non-alc wine it's nice compared to selling alcoholic wine where are in a drinking environment. You know?
Interfacing with people who are morbidly intoxicated in most instances.
Yeah, and probably not, and ultimately not feeling good about it. But in the same way, it's like I put a suit on and I go to my office to do this thing and I don't really like it. It's no different than that. Like I apply in numbers in a spreadsheet or in alcohol or in whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting, man. Your latest release as well, we've obviously been enjoying the sparkling rosé at 0.5%. That is such a convincingly built wine. I don't know that I'm not drinking regular, high quality, expensive sparkling wine. Yeah. I don't know that I wouldn't know the difference. Yeah. And it's not because I hadn't had the comparable. It was my predominant consumable was pink sparkling wine.
Yeah, that stuff is so nice. This one, the input wine, as we go further down the path of like what makes this the best product, it really is, it sounds trite, but it's the input. The input product is ultimately what determines what's there. In the same way as like at TH Wines, towards the very end, it really was just berries, having an understanding of what a good berry is. And then it wasn't a talking point. It was like, these berries in this condition, they really are a low intervention because I know where they're going to go. And that's kind of what we're doing with non-alc wine. It's like, well, yeah, it means we have to deal with expensive inputs, but it's like, well, of course, that's how you make a good product. Or it's like it's a nice restaurant that I go to. The chef's probably going to say, you know what, the inputs actually matter. Crazy, you know, all these things.
Where the fish comes from is kind of a big deal. Yeah,
or it's like, I want to show you what a material looks like, what makes this a good product. Well, the input material is actually nice, you know, and that's one of those rewarding things about the product is that a lot of it is about the input. I mean, there's so much that is just fake around this, but I'm glad you like that rosé and like that profile.
Yeah, just love the philosophy. It's okay. Do you know when a band that you follow puts out a new album and it sucks? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Yeah.
Because nostalgia dictates your purchases.
Yeah.
Dave Matthews puts out a new album, I'm buying it whether it sucks or not.
Yeah.
This would be the same thing with your product because I love you and care about you.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter what you were doing. If you were doing something, I'd be consuming it.
Yeah.
It just so happens that it's a fucking awesome product.
Yeah.
On top of that.
Yeah.
And that's what's so exciting about this product is that it's convincing. So congratulations, man.
Thanks. And I think that the nice thing about being in the wine world is you get to drag people along, and it is going to go like this. But that's also the nice part of it. Like, we're not trying to make Coca-Cola. In fact, we're trying to make something that is interesting, and it does have nuances. And so if I get an email saying like, hey, this tastes different, instead of me apologizing, it's like, no, that's great. This is supposed to taste different. This is not supposed to be Coca-Cola. It's going to change in bottles.
This isn't a Big Mac.
You will, you will see variations. That's baked into an agricultural good. It's like that, like those striations, like that's not a screw up. That's actually real, right?
That's a real thing.
It just wouldn't click with people. And so our product is trying to, finding people like you that say that is how I connect with these things. Yeah.
Tyler, thank you very much for your time today, man.
This was a pleasure.
I look forward to more dialogue of this fidelity in the future. Yeah. This high fidelity conversation.
Yeah.
And when you take risks in a small town, it doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And the risks that you've taken in business and the products that you've developed over the years have made a difference, and you're of the highest quality producer in our region. So I'm proud of you and what you've done, and proud to be your friend, man.
Yeah, I'm honored.
Nice work. Nice work. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.